All right. Boston, let's go. Okay. Erica, I might kick it off. I think we've got a decent number of people here. All right. Well, hi everyone. Thank you for making the time in your day to spend it with me. I appreciate it. I really hope that you're able to get something out of this. I'm really excited to be talking about my experience and also just this topic in general, because I think it's such an important piece of the application process, and it really deserves a lot of care and thought. And yeah, I'm excited to answer any questions that you guys have. Okay, so I'll just dive in to introductions. So my name is Alice. Thank you for coming. I'm an incoming MBA candidate at Stanford GSB. I'm also a management leadership for tomorrow MBA prep alum at this point, but I was part of the program for the last year. So if you're in MLT, happy to chat about that as well. And I spent the last 5 years, I graduated from undergrad in 2019. I spent the last 5 years in investments and private equity, specializing in real estate PE. And now I'm talking to you. Okay, so to start, just a few logistics and disclaimers. If you're asking questions, please just put them in the chat. I'll take some time to kind of answer them throughout the session, and we'll also have a Q&A at the end. Please, if you're asking questions, let's just keep it general so that, you know, everyone can kind of benefit from that question. So if it's something super specific to you, I'm happy to answer offline, maybe through a session on Leland. For these materials, I'll have a couple of links in here, such as my recommended packet and some other things. If you want a copy of those, please do book a free initial session or chat me on Leland, and I'd be happy to share them with you. The next one's a disclaimer. I'm not an MBA admissions expert, right? So I wasn't an admissions officer. I did participate in a really fantastic MBA prep program with an excellent coach. And I also had an excellent consultant throughout the process as well. And so everything in here is, you know, through the lens of my own experience and also just best practices that a lot of different coaches will tell you, and that are also on the Leland website. And also in terms of the lens, it's everything that I felt like I could control, right? At the end of the day, I didn't read any of my recommendation letters. I waived my right to. And so I can't tell you at the end of the day what they looked like, but I can tell you everything that I did in my power to make sure that I knew that they had everything that they needed, right? And so that's the lens that I'm going through with this. At the end of this, if there's anything that you'd like me to know, feedback, reviews, all are welcome. I'd really appreciate it. That's how we get better. So please do. And lastly, I do have a discount code from now until next week. It's 25% off on hourly services. So if you'd like to book, that's the code. And if you miss the code, feel free to just chat me on Leland, and I'd be happy to share it as well. Okay. Okay, so are there any questions? I'm gonna stop there. I don't know if there are any questions, feel free to, you know, go off mute or something, or post it in the
Yeah, I
chat.
have a quick question. You mentioned that you waived the right to read your rec letters. I'm
Yeah.
curious if that's like a strategic move. Does your recommender know that? Why would you choose to do that?
Yeah, so your recommenders do know. Strategic, I think I'm going to use a different word. Well, I'm just going to say, so I waived my right because I wanted my recommenders to feel 100% trusted by me and comfortable to write, you know, whatever their true story is, right? At the end of the day, I could have had a letter of recommendation in there that maybe it wasn't great. I don't know, right? But I felt like if I, you know, demonstrated to them that I trusted what they had to say and I valued and respected it. Not saying that if you don't waive your right, then those things aren't true as well. But for me, it was a symbol of I trust you, and you know, I'm going to give you the liberty to write, you know, what you want to write at the end of the day. I mean, I'm going to give you everything that I, would like you to include. But just in terms of like integrity, I just really, I didn't want to write it, and I also didn't want to read it. But I know a lot of people who were able to read theirs, and I don't think it actually like matters in the long run, as long as your recommender is like okay with sharing it. Some people will share it, but I didn't ask. So strategic, I don't know if it's strategic, but that you could say so, I guess. Does that make sense, Christian?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, cool. So let's dive into just an overview of, this process. So when you're thinking about, initiating or asking your recommenders, starting to think about the process, I'd say anywhere from like 3 to 6 months in advance. And that advance period is, to your application. So for round 2, this was, I had kind of already been talking about this with my recommenders now, even if not in a very direct way, in a very informal way. I'd say before you want to kind of bring up this topic with your recommenders or your potential recommenders, you should have an idea of the schools that you want to apply to, their personal essays, so that when you're having these conversations, you can kind of like tailor, what you're passionate about, what matters most to you, or why that school, for example. You should also have an idea of, your story and your reasons why for an MBA. And so I'd say I probably started having informal coffee chats with my potential recommenders around this time last year, maybe even a little earlier, actually, because I was close to them. And a lot of that surrounded me telling them, hey, I'm really interested in an MBA. This is why I want to go to an MBA. What do you think about that? And I think those kind of conversations can be really helpful too, because you can gauge whether your recommender is approves or is in line, whether they're on the same page as you. Because you could have a recommender who doesn't think you should be going to business school, and that probably isn't the person that you want writing your letter or that you want to ask. So having that like preliminary informal coffee chat is really helpful to kind of test the waters of, is this person even interested? Like, are they in line with my future aspirations? And then lastly, I'd say you should have an idea of the things that you may have done in that role that you will want your recommender to highlight, right? And so I knew that in my previous role, I had like basically revamped this model template that I knew was a big part of my time there, and I wanted them to touch on. So I kind of came ready to kind of like talk about that or like give it to them in like a recommender bullet. So that's something you want to start thinking about if you haven't yet. And then I'd say there are like 3 stages to really thinking about this whole recommendation process. There's everything that you're doing before, you get the yes from your recommenders. So whether that's, what we just spoke about in the prerequisites, or anything to kind of get ready to have that conversation, pretty much. And then there's everything that you're doing between the yes and the submission. And so that's the recommender packet. It's several different follow-ups, it's check-ins, it's answering any questions. And then post apps, you're really sending. So if you're in round 2, that's probably like Q1 of the year, you're sending thank yous, you're maybe queuing them into external scholarships that you're interested in that will require an additional letter of recommendation. And you're also giving them updates like, hey, I got an interview, so on and so forth. Okay, the other thing about recommendations, it's really the only time where the schools will have an outside perspective. And so it becomes really important that you're able to somewhat control that narrative. In terms of the mechanic, and I'll touch on that later on, like a bit more too, but in terms of the mechanics, you're going to have to request the recommender through the school portal, and different schools it'll look slightly different, but you request them, and then their recommenders will fill out some questions and maybe write an essay, and then they'll submit everything through the portal. And each school will have, or a lot of schools will have their own personal requirements. So that could be, you know, 1 from an advisor or 2 from an advisor or so on and so forth. And if there's, or, okay, and some of them will also say from your current employer. And if that's one that if you're not sending a letter of recommendation from your current employer, there will be an opportunity for you to explain that. So I didn't have any recommenders from my current employer. And I explained that in like the other, in the other optional essay section of the application. And then again, most schools will require 2 letters of recommendation. Again, 1 from a manager. And the other one could be like an extracurricular, like maybe you're on like a nonprofit board or something that could qualify. And an MIT is actually only 1 letter of recommendation. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick sec to tackle some of these questions in the chat. Do adcoms care if you waive your right? Does that communicate anything to them? I can't answer that. I guess what I will say is people have told me that it's a cause for question, right? It's like, okay, why didn't you waive your right? But I don't feel comfortable enough to answer that question, honestly. I don't know. But that's a really good question, Evan. Were your recommenders from your undergrad? No, I think if unless you're applying like for the deferred MBA, I'm pretty sure they all have to be from some kind of employment or like post-grad organization. So no, mine were not from undergrad. If I haven't been at my current job for over 4 years, wouldn't necessarily want them to know I'm applying. Would it be a red flag not to have my current supervisor recommend me, instead have my former supervisor from 5 years ago recommend me? I have only had 2 employers. Okay, hi Ethan. So this was my situation. So as I said on the first slide, or if you're just coming in, I've actually didn't, the third place isn't on there, but I've worked at 3 companies in the last 5 years. And so I got really lucky because I could choose from 2 other companies. I don't think it's a bad thing if you're having 2 recommenders from the same company, but it's good to diversify, right? And so I was able to get one from the 2 prior companies that I worked at and not my current employer. And a big reason that I didn't tell my current employer is I just didn't, there's always the chance that you don't get it, right? Like that is always a chance. And I didn't want a situation in which I have now communicated my, you know, goals to go to a business school, and everybody knows that now. And now I haven't gotten in. And now it's like kind of awkward because they know that I wanted to leave, right? So I think if it's not a place where there's a defined business school exit, it's harder to get a letter of recommendation from there, and that's why I didn't. And I don't think, well, clearly the schools didn't care because I had 3 recommenders. I had 1 from my first job. So she was my manager for only a year, and she was my manager the year after, like a year after college. Like, so it was like the most green I could have been, right? But she probably had the strongest recommendation out of all 3 of them because we had a personal relationship and stayed close throughout the 5 years. And then the other 2 were both from my most previous employer, and one was like a little bit higher up as a manager, and then the other one was like just like a level below, a couple levels below. And that was more so I knew their workloads were really just kind of a lot. And so I just wanted to spread out the 5 schools amongst 3 different recommenders. They don't care. I don't think they care. I think it's more about the quality of the letter, the strength of the relationship, the length of the relationship. But I just, in the optional, I just said, it was very like short too. Like my recommenders are, you know, my current employer doesn't know about my business school plans. And that's why I don't have a recommender from my current employer. Like not a big deal at all. What is the impact of having a letter of rec from an internal source from the institution you're applying to compared to your employer? I'm not sure. You're saying like if I'm applying to Stanford, I have a letter from someone at Stanford? Abdullah, feel free to come off mute for that one. I'm gonna skip to the next one for now. When the school only requires one faculty letter recommendation, do you think it's better to just submit 2 letters? I think you would have to tell me, like, I would have to believe that those 2 are differentiated enough. And the second one adds something that is so like integral, but then why wouldn't they just be your first one? So I wouldn't, well, some will say like, don't, like only submit one. If it's optional, I guess why not, right? Like side letters are great, but I personally, I don't know that I would have. But as long as it's like you can, I mean, you should, but I would just make sure that they're different enough and complementary. My direct supervisor will likely rotate right before I apply or bond one next year after we work together for 2 years. Would they no longer be recognized? Oh, rotate, and you'll still be there. I think that's dicey. I don't, Hassam, I'm not sure, honestly. I think this is a great question, but I think it might be one for like an admission. I'm gonna flag it. I'm not actually sure. I'm gonna skip that one. Can it be a former manager if not a current one? Yep, you have a better. That's fine. So the reason, Hassam, I think it's more so what will they be doing? Like, if are they going? So I think that's the question of like, what will the direct supervisor will then be doing? I guess the Navy. I don't know. Okay.
Hey, I
You
can
know,
oh, never mind.
yeah, no, please
I can
do.
clarify. Yeah,
Please.
so I'm an officer in the Navy.
Yeah.
I work directly for the XO, so the officer who's second in command at our unit up here in Newport. So we have been working together for about 9 months now. I got here in September, and I plan on applying round 1 to 25, not this fall. And she's probably going to rotate to her next military activity, still in the same vicinity, likely. But she won't be my supervisor anymore as of like probably next summer. So would that not count
I feel
as like
like,
a current manager?
oh, well,
Yeah, because
okay.
she'd be
Well, even
leaving the unit right
I
before.
get what you're saying, but even so though, like that's no different than just not getting anyone from your current employer at all. And you can always explain that. So I think that should be fine, but don't quote me on it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. What would be a reason to not have a letter from your current employer? Okay, got it answered. Thank you. To recommend the employer be well known and cater to a high caliber job such as I think so. I have that on one of the slides. I think seniority is nice, but it's not like it's you don't need it, right? But they need to be in some kind of like supervisory role. But in terms of like whether it's like the partner at the firm or not, like that doesn't matter. If anything, it should just be someone who's very familiar with your work product. And I find that oftentimes partners may not be as involved in your day-to-day work product. I hope that answers that, Trevor. How did you explain this to the school? I think I answered that, but it was just a quick, I want to preserve the relationship that I have at my current company. I don't want to jeopardize anything. Would it be a plus if we could also hold it? Yes, so I have that on my, I have that as well. Yes, I think it is. I think it's one of those things that it's like nice to have, but like not, obviously not a requirement. So 2 of my 3 recommenders had MBAs, and those 2 each wrote for the schools that I was applying to, like their alma maters. But one of them I didn't get into that school and the other one I did. So it doesn't, I don't think it actually matters, but it is, I mean, it's nice to have just because they have a better understanding of like the experience of getting an MBA, but it's definitely not required. Did you give your comment any extra? Yes, I did. Yes. So I'm going to come back to that, Anne. I will come back to it. I don't have a mic. I just are the letters of regs, not in the direction. There's our letter. Okay, Abdullah, I'm gonna come back to that. Sorry, thoughts on letter of support. I'm gonna come back to that too because I think it's a little dicey. I think side letters are great, but some schools actively just don't care about them. Like Like, I genuinely don't think Stanford cares about your side letter from like, I don't know, that you, this a person that you know that that also went to Stanford, but it doesn't hurt. Like it doesn't like eliminate you, but I don't know that. Like basically, I know a lot of people who sent in quite a few side letters at multiple different schools, and it just didn't work out. Like it didn't change, it didn't move the needle. So that's all I'll say about that. Okay, I'm gonna pause on the questions for a second and then just move on a little bit here, just because I'm looking at the time. Okay, so this is just like your typical round 2 timeline, right? So you're submitting in January and working backwards from there. Just recognize that there are holidays, right? So I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty stressed November and December because I just had some of my letters were just like nowhere near ready or in. And I think at some point, I think like the first week of January, or maybe like at the last week of December, I got a text from one of my recommenders, and it was like, should it be in bullet form or in essay form? And I was like, oh fuck, like I need to like double down. So I'd say make sure that throughout like October, November, and December, you're really just like aware of, you know, what you recommend, what's on their plate, and just like that they just know what's going on in terms of like deadlines and what things should look like. And that will all come with the stuff that you provide them. But so in August and September, you should pretty much have your person down. I know it could take into October, but you really want to have like your like 2 or 3 people, maybe even 4, one as a backup. Communicate your needs, expectations, what the process looks like for them. I'd say in September and October, you want to be working on your recommender packets and kind of sharing that with them, especially before the holiday period, just because like after I shared with them, I think I had like a quick follow-up like call or like a coffee with them just to walk through anything, see if they had any questions. And then in November and December, it was really like probably following up every couple of weeks. Like I'd say I probably followed up every 2 weeks, every 2 to 3 weeks. Like, hey, like anything I could, or I'd send them additional things, like just like keeping an open communication loop throughout the entire time. Okay, so these are just a list of so I'd say the left side are things that like are a must, like non-negotiables. And then on the right side are just like nice to have, but like I truly personally believe that it's not going to make or break things. But some of the strong things, make sure they're just advocates. I mean, like they should be supporting your goals, like there should be a trusting relationship there. At the end of the day, your recommenders are going to be writing letters, so they should be articulate and compelling and really advocating and trying to say, you know, you would be a fool to not admit this person. Like you have to admit this person, basically. And here's why. Is someone trying to say something, or is that just a mic? Okay. Again, offering diverse perspectives. And so I had, in each of my 2 pairings, I had someone who was more in the manager level and who I knew more personally. And then the second person was more like, okay, like they can speak to like my work product as an employee, and how I learn, etc., and how I add to the team. Make sure they have time, you know, things come up yet. Just again, back to the partner question, right? Like it should be someone that can dedicate time to thinking about and writing your letters. And also just, I think the length is really important. So for me, I had only known, by the time I was starting the process, I had only known my managers for a year, which is like enough time for sure. But then, I mean, I knew my other manager for 5 years, even though, you know, it was 5 years ago, and the others I knew for 3 or 4 years. And so it felt like a non-brainer to me to have people outside of my current organization, because they could just provide a more fulsome view of who I was as a person and as an employee. So some of the things that are bonuses, I'd say if they have experience writing letters, that's great. If they have an MBA, if they know you on a personal level or have seniority, or they're more recent. And if you have like one from in your organization and then one from like something different that you do that's not your employer. Some of the common myths, I think, that came up a lot throughout the process, at least for me, were, again, so recommender does not need to be an alum of the business program that you're applying to. Doesn't have to be from your current employer, and you don't need a different recommender for each school. So if you're applying to 5 schools, you don't need 5 or 10 recommend, like you just don't need that. And also your letters don't only have to speak to your work product or your performance, right? So I think one of my letters talked about just my role within the organization as like, you know, like a citizen of the organization. And so I think that not only, but like, I think that was like a great lens or perspective into, okay, this is how someone shows up in the context of a business school. Like when you're thinking about business school, they're looking for people who are involved, going to be involved, are good citizens, are going to be great alumni, are going to get jobs, and a bunch of other things as well. But a lot of that comes through the stuff that you do outside of work, and it's great to have someone speak to that. So this is a recommender chart that Leland actually has on the website. I didn't use this for the process, but I think it's great in terms of just looking at each, whatever your criteria are, or these criteria, looking at each and all of the candidates that you have for your recommenders, and then just taking an honest stock of, okay, well, this person's like, this relationship is really strong, right? Like it's been 10 years going. Okay, Billy, like our relationship's like a little weaker. It's been like a year. And then just being able to visualize your options and kind of come to something that, and it might be that maybe Billy isn't like a 0, but like Billy could be like a backup if like, you know, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 kind of fail. But this is the link is here in this. I can also, I can put it in the chat as well. I can do that afterwards, but it's on the Leland website. Okay, so I'd say when you're, let me take a look at the questions really quick. It speaks to your character as a person versus giving examples what you worked on together and the caliber of said work. Oh, okay. I think both, Evan. I think this is a great question. I think you want both. You want someone in an ideal world who will speak to, this is the, like, this person is like the, like, has the best character that I've ever seen. He's like resilient and like he's good, like, so yada yada yada. And also he's great. He's a great worker. I think having one and not the other will be not a red flag, but I think that's just a weaker letter. So having both, I think, is a sweet spot of both is where you want to be. What happens if I'm on a career break at the moment? Could I just reach out to my former employer? Yeah, that should be fine. My team has 2 managers, but we are split in terms of who we report to for HR. Right, so still who HR list is. Can school tell who HR list is? I just seen that they're making this. So at the end of all of this, they're gonna verify all of your recommenders. Like they're gonna send something to them and they're gonna say, is this the role that you said that they said that you were in? And they're also gonna have to say what roles they're in. I think this is like a minutia. I think you're fine. If the recommender asks you to write the letter, what should you do? Oh. What would I do? I wouldn't be comfortable with that personally, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I mean, just think about like the ramifications, right? Like just consequences versus like just like think about those. I don't know. That's a personal decision. Entrepreneurs having investors write letters of recommendation. That's a special case. I can't answer that personally. I'm not sure. Do you have the same recommenders for every school you applied to? Was there a strategy for picking different people to recommend? Yeah, so I went with one person wrote for all 5 schools. The other 2, so I also applied through consortium. So there are 2 schools that were in consortium. So I had my consortium recommender, and then there are 2 schools that weren't. So that was like Penn and Harvard. So he wrote for that. So that's kind of how it's split up. And I'm happy to talk about consortium as well. It should be an essay form, correct? Just take the slide and shift the month's end to September for it to apply to R1. Yeah. What did your initial email look like for your past employers? So a lot of them were in person, actually. I would like take them on coffee dates and like not ask them, but like talk about business school a lot. And then like the next coffee date, I'd be like, yeah, so like last time we talked about business school, this time I think we should talk about recommendations and like, what do you think about writing me a letter of recommendation? Yeah, so I asked one over email, and that was just because I was honestly terrified to ask. I was just so scared. And I was like, you know what, I can just send it over email. I don't have to look at his face, and he can say no and it'll be fine. But most of them I asked in person. Okay, I'm gonna go back to here. So I'm sure you guys have all read all of this. There's really nothing crazy that I want to read the room. I will say read the room is very real, because you're going to have a conversation with someone, and just from their body language, their facial expressions, it's going to be clear that, you know, they don't actually want to write you a letter. They're maybe going to say yes because they feel like they have to, and you just don't want that person writing your letter. So just be very conscious of that. And yeah. Things happen, give them plenty of time, contingency plans, backups, make it very easy. I'm gonna skip through that. Okay, so this is kind of meaty. So this is kind of just looking at the different types of recommendation letters. And so GMAC has what they call the common letter of recommendation. And if you look at here, these are all of the schools that go based off of this common letter. And it's also right on the GMAC website. And basically like it's like undergrad, where you just have like everybody answers the same question kind of. And so that's great, because then your recommender letters can be a little bit more standardized. And some of the questions that it's answering, well, there are 3 components. First, it's just the personal information about the recommender. And then it's the leadership assessment grid. And then they're open-ended recommendation questions. So the grid looks a little bit different. This is from the GMAC website, but it might look different on the portal. But basically it's broken down into 5 categories: achievement, influence, people, personal qualities, and cognitive abilities. And your recommenders will have to like rank you, like rank where you fall based off of all of these like character traits and competencies. So like results orientation focuses on and drives toward delivering on goals, no basis for judgment, up to invents new approaches with measurably better results, works to deliver. I mean, ideally you want like the thing that you need to remind your recommenders is that, especially if you're applying to schools like Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, they're all overinflated, right? Everyone is ranking everyone as top bucket, right? Because you want your person to get in, right? And you probably believe that. So just make sure they're aware that everyone's kind of like ranking things very highly. So the question section, brief description of your interaction, your performance versus other people in your role, a piece of constructive feedback that you've given, that you've received, and if there's anything else they should know. The one thing to be mindful of is that some common schools are up to 500 words, but then Harvard uses the common questions, but it's like 250 or something like that. So just be mindful of that when you're sending that to your recommenders. These are the schools. So these are the non-common schools. So I applied to Penn, MIT, and Harvard. And I'd say these are like just a little bit more particular. And I had created this like recommender bullets that kind of answered to Wharton, but then like it was like you could have used it for the other schools too. So yeah, it's asking like why you believe this candidate will succeed in the Wharton MBA program, but then also like that is, you know, more like they can pull pieces from like performance, like he's gonna succeed or she's gonna succeed because like they're just so much better than everybody else or whatever. Or like they're gonna succeed because I gave them this feedback and like this is how they turn it around. So they can be repurposed, but just note that they're not all the same questions when you're creating your workbooks. Okay, so building your packet. I'm gonna spin through this. So the recommender packet, super important, I think, and a lot of people will say so. It helps you control the narrative. It gives like, it lays out the land of this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, this is where I want to do it and why. And it shows them what you need of them, right? Like, and honestly, like it shows that you're committed. It just shows that you're a serious person and they will respect that. Yeah. So let's look at my, oh, I need to change the share. 1 second. Okay, can you see this?
Yes, Alice.
Thank you. Okay, so this is my packet and I'm happy to share it. Now we're just gonna kind of go through it very quickly. Start off with a content section, big thank you, my career goals, short and long term, more context into my long-term goal. I was going to something a little bit more niche, mental health tech, and so I provided like a market map of all of the mental health tech companies, and you know what it means, like what I'm trying to do basically. Why an MBA, clearly laid out. Also, I just like I know that they didn't read this whole thing from cover to cover. Like I know that, so I'm not delusional. And they probably won't read yours from cover to cover, but it's a great reference point, right? Like as they're writing this, like they might forget and they're like, wait, like why did she even want to do this? Like, all right, here it is. Like, so it's good to do. But just know that they probably won't read everything. So I'm answering questions to them, right? Like this is like the Wharton question, like why should we accept her? Why should she come here, right? Like these are all my attributes. I'm like feeding everything to them, like not just like this is the work that I did, but it's like this is the person that I am and this is what I care about. Like, and that is so important, right? Because they're writing about not just, you know, your work product, but you as a person. Like there are 12 character traits that they have to kind of touch on. So you better make sure that, you know, a few of them come to mind when they're looking at this. And so I had also sent them like deadlines, timelines and stuff, some important notes, Google Drives that had like a Stanford grid, some other recommendation templates, like a recommendation letter, other like nitty gritty things. So I applied through consortium, so this is not as relevant, but it also has like I did Stanford and Tuck through consortium. And so like you know, this is my why Stanford, like this is what Stanford's looking for, right? They're looking for demonstrated leadership, like, and this is why I have it basically. Why Tuck? I did this for every single school. What are they looking for? Like, what do Tuckies look like? Here are the common LORs. Here's the leadership behavior guide. And I did this for every single school. Why HBS? Like, what are they looking for? Again, like their specific matrix is a little bit different. And again, the 300 and the 250 words that I was saying before. Wharton, like I just, you know, so basically it was a template that just kind of rolled through. But I did it for every school and that was really important to me. So that was my packet. and it doesn't have to be your packet, but I guess coming out of that, it's very verbose. But I think the goals are there, right? So they know why, they know where, they know why, where. And I'm feeding them a bunch of different things. So the next thing I want to show you, any questions? Honestly, I can't see the chat right now. So if anyone wants to come off mute and has any questions, feel free to ask while I pull up this other.
I have a question. What's the difference between applying with consortium versus like by yourself?
Yeah, so great question. So consortium has, so not everyone can do consortium. To do consortium, to be in consortium, you have to demonstrate that you have that you're about their mission, basically, and their mission is like advancing the success of people of color. It's not restricted to people of color, anyone can apply, but you need to show that like you are about that mission. And really the better, what I liked about applying through consortium, I only had 2 schools, but it's just a lot cheaper, because if you're applying to like, let's say you're applying to 10 schools, and if they all happen to be consortium schools, it's at a fraction of the price of applying to them directly. So that was a big thing for me. But then there are also a lot of other benefits that come with being a consortium fellow. A lot of them are monetary, so you might get a consortium fellowship at a specific school, and that's great. But in terms of the application itself, there's an additional application. Like there's a common app, but then there are also some extra essays that you have to fill out that are consortium specific. And you also need to have an extra recommender who is your consortium recommender. But honestly, it's like not like, it's like very, like my friend wrote my letter of recommendation for consortium, and like we went to the same college. He was like 2 years older than me. And so it doesn't, the recommendation requirements are a little less stringent there. Yeah, so I'd say those are probably the main differences. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure who asked
Yeah,
that.
that's super helpful. Thank you so
Suni.
much.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yeah.
Suni. Okay, any other questions?
Where will we be able to find the packet that you just showed us? It looked amazing.
Well, if you want that packet, you gotta book a session with me. That's how you get the packet. That's it. I'll share it with you. I'd be happy to, but you gotta book a session. So this is the other thing that I did. My recommendation letter bullets. This one I won't share, but so there are different areas where, so I pulled out the question, right? I was like, okay, how do the candidates' performance compare to other people? I'm like, here is how, like, I am telling you, like, I'm a hand raiser. I'm eager to learn. I'm giving you a specific example. Like when I joined the company, here's what I did. Here's on this deal, here's what I did. On this deal, here's what we did together. And I also facilitated and did. Like very in detail, like specific anecdotes about my time there and the things that I wanted them to kind of focus on. And also just thinking about like the adjectives that you want to, I don't want to say feed, but like that you want to feed, right? Like think about the character traits and like the things that you want them to think about your brand. What do you want your brand to be? And just put that in there. This is your brand. So, and I did that with the other question too. Describe the most important piece of feedback, like my principal strengths. Again, like that question they ask, they literally say, what are the candidate's principal strengths? Persistence, determination, adaptability. And here's why. When you gave me this feedback, here's what I did with it. Like so on and so forth. So those are the 2 pieces of dot. And also, I actually didn't give any bullets to one of my recommenders. She was vibing. She just kind of went for it. I totally trusted her. This is the one from 5 years ago. That woman is like she would, I can't speak more highly of her. So I didn't send her any bullets. And also she had done letters of recommendation before, and I think she knew she would be writing one, and also had like stuff, you know, up her sleeve that I didn't even remember I had done. So it worked out perfectly. So those are the packets. Let me go in the chat briefly. Oh, I'm gonna go. Okay. Is it possible to get applying via consortium but not get the fellowship? That's a great question. Yes. So applying to consortium and then the fellowship, like getting money, those are actually two separate things. Getting money is like like the school controls that, but you could get into consortium. One, you could get into consortium and not get any money, but you could get into consortium and not get into that school. So it's like, it's really weird, but they are two different processes. And there's no way, like, they're not going to give you stats. There's no way to like model it out. It's just, yeah, but it happens. A lot saves you a lot of money on application. Yep, that's correct. Yes, okay. No, yeah. Wow, you guys are so nice. How did I manage everything with a full-time job and other life commitments? I had an excellent support network, honestly. This is something that you just can't do alone. And if you have done it alone, I commend you. Like, I think even if you're doing this process in isolation and there was nothing else going on in the world, it would still cause emotional distress from time to time, and it would still be a lot to manage. And I think that there are people, I think people underestimate what really goes in through this process. I started this process in January of 2023. I took my last GRE test on January 1st, 2024, and then proceeded to apply 4 days later. Like, and then after that, you're like still applying for stuff. You're applying for financial aid, you're applying for external scholarships, you're doing interview prep, so it really doesn't end until it ends. And I don't know how I managed it, but I'd say my support system. I couldn't have done it with my MLT squad, with my coach. I tried to quit so many times. I tried to quit in like December, like so many times. And you really just need to surround yourself with people who believe in you and who, you know, can just get you out of that self-doubt, that funk, and help you push forward. So it's the people, I will say. How long did it take you to make the deck? Oh my God. It took me like a few days, probably a few long days of working on it. Let's say like a week. It probably took me like a week, but I'm like really like, you know, so I think that's probably why. But I had also, I will say, I will credit MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow. That was their like color template. There's a lot of stuff that I added in on my own, but like it helped get the wheels turning. So that was super helpful. Can we get a copy of this deck? Yes. Book a free session. Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm actually super close to the end. And then after that, I'll just like open it up to you know, verbal, yeah, questions. Exactly. Thanks, Liz. That's exactly what I meant. These examples are actually on the website, on the Leland website. Leland is awesome, guys. Really take advantage of the resource. There's so much going on in there, and I wish I, you know, was more tapped in when I was applying. So this is an example. There's the full essay is on Leland. This is just like an excerpt that I took out, but it's answering the question of your interaction with the person and the role in the organization. And so I just kind of highlighted, this is the Booth Deferred Program, which is why it's intern. I just kind of highlighted the things I really like. Wholeheartedly recommend him to your program. It is my privilege to wholeheartedly recommend him to your program. Like the second at the end, it's like, the school is a known power horse, and graduating with distinction is a significant achievement, one not to be overlooked. I believe he'll be a powerful contributor in the classroom. Like, they need to just, everything that they write needs to be full of conviction, and you need to feed them that conviction. And also just be honest with them. Be like, listen, like, here's an example. Here's a sample. Like, people are going all in. I need you to go all in for me. The second one is describe the most important piece of constructive feedback. So they say what the feedback is, narrow your focus, and then they talk about how he just completely delivered by like, following up, taking the advice to heart. He presented a more refined focus. So super specific, right? Like not just, okay, I gave him this feedback and like, that's it. It's like, okay, I gave him this feedback and like, here's what he did with it, or here's what she did with it. And like, you can control that narrative in your own, like, the bullets that you're sending them. I believe he'll be a meaningful contributor and one day an accomplished alum. That's great. They love accomplished alums. So this is actually feedback from my recommender, one of my recommenders. And so I thought you did a great job. This is verbatim, copy and paste. I thought you did a great job explaining what each school and why each school you're extremely organized. And then my only anxiety point was not knowing the timeline for both schools. You guys saw me put that timeline. I showed you that timeline. I bet that was my scattered, but a calendar with any touch points, milestones, and deadlines would have been. So I come from an industry where there's a calendar for everything. There's literally a calendar for everything. And I like, it's not too much. So just send like 3-week reminder, like essay due, recommendation letter due in 20 days, recommendation letter due in whatever, and just add them to the calendar. They'll love that. So I hope that helps. Hope this is helpful. Okay, I'm gonna leave this up while I take some questions. So take it away. Liz, let's hear it.
Hi, Alice. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
Yeah, I wonder what if there's an awkward moment that the recommender say, you can just drop it for me. Do you actually sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Oh, I said, what if the recommenders say you can just drop it for me?
Oh, like you can just write it for me?
Yeah, because they're
Yeah.
busy or something.
So I don't know if I mentioned this, but external scholarships. There were a couple of scholarships that I didn't tell one. I didn't realize I would need a letter, right? Like I didn't read that far in advance plus I just found the scholarship, and I didn't have like a big enough heads up on the letter. So I think, and I told myself I would only apply to this if I like get it to Stanford. And so I literally had like 3 days to turn it around. Right. And not only turn it around, but like also ask my recommender. Like I literally had to be like, hey, like, can you please write me another letter in also like 3 or 4 days? And I'm going to be honest, he was kind of like, I don't know, that's 3 days. I don't know if I can do that. And so I was like, I can draft out using the bullets. Basically, it was like using the bullets I had and like showing him how I thought it could potentially answer the question. So not writing it for him necessarily, but doing enough of the heavy lifting that for them, it could be like okay, like let me add in my own like word and stuff. Like, I don't think you should be writing your recommender's letter. That means to me that your recommender doesn't have enough time and there has to be someone else out there for you. But like, I am a fan of doing as much as possible so that they are, they don't feel overwhelmed. Yeah. So I would say that to them. I would be like, like there are ramifications for that. Like I could get in a lot of trouble. I could just not get into the school, especially if they found out. I would prefer to not put myself in that situation. Is there something else that I can do to help make the process better for you? How do we work together on this?
Alice, I'm so sorry. We have a session that's starting in about a minute that we have to hop over to and open up the Zoom. I feel so bad. I just dropped your profile in the chat if people want to reach out, and I know I'll give you a moment for a final word, but just wanted to flag that in the interest of our next panel. I'm so sorry to cut you short.
No. Thank you, Erica. sorry I didn't get to everyone's question. Feel free to message me on Leland. It was really great to get to chat with you guys, and I hope that you took something away. But yeah, good luck with the process. You got this. I'll be your biggest fan if I'm your coach. And if I'm not your coach, but you got this, and best of luck, guys. You're almost there. There's an end in sight. I promise.
Thank you,
All right.
Alice.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.